Bronkgate has much less powerful generics, and a lot of their generics rely on set orders. You can't use Bowl Mine. Like, if you use Bowl Mine in Messiah, I think the deck would be infinitely better. Hey everyone, this is Knight, bringing you an updated deck profile of Messiah, updated for set 13. So, why did I decide to bring back Messiah? Well, after Messiah got released in Deer Days, I started playing around with this really funny build that we're going to be taking a look at, and unironically, I think that this build kind of accelerates Messiah to actually being a playable and semi-viable deck. Now, of course, with the set 13 meta, I don't really think that it has the greatest chance against the big three. So you probably mileage might vary depending on how good of a player you are and how lucky you get, and just like a whole bunch of other factors. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the deck profile. Oh, and last thing to mention, this is an updated deck profile for January 19th, meaning that this deck does have 54 cards at the moment, but at the end of the video, I'll go ahead and mention what 4 cards you can take out if you want to play it right now. Right, so as always, going to be starting off with the ride line. Of course, you do kind of have to play the grade 0 and the grade 1, because when you ride over these, specifically Neon Messiah with the Sleep Messiah, that is how you get your crest. Technically, you can play anything in this grade 2 slot, but I am opting to just continue with the Messiah ride line and play the Awaking Messiah, just because I think it is probably the best option that you can go for right now. So in the Soul, when you have a grade 4 Messiah placed on your Vanguard circle, you can call it to rearguard, and then of course if you call it, you get to soul charge 1, so you do get to actually just refund the cost from calling it. And then when it's unlocked during your turn, you choose one of your units in the same column as this unit, and it gets an extra 10k until the end of turn. So now in this current build, this Awakening Messiah has another utility which we will be seeing, and is actually a very good card. Of course, we don't really want to be running more than one, even though I do think it is a pretty good card, just because of honestly just the meta, and that putting more of this into your deck is probably not a good idea. But of course, our top end is of course going to be that Alter Ego Messiah. Once you do get the Alter Ego Messiah crest, you are unable to ride into anything that is not a Messiah, so obviously we do have to be riding into our grade 3. This is the old version, but it is the same card. So on GB2, when a locked card is unlocked, either yours or your opponent's, you can Soul Blast 1 and then draw a card. Now that is a once per instance, so if 3 cards unlocked, you can Soul Blast 3 and draw 3 cards. And then of course the other skill, the Stride skill, when you stride over this, you can counterblast 1 and lock one of your rear guards. So in order to lock one of your opponent's rear guards and give your Vanguard an extra 5k. The 5k is very easy to forget, and a lot of the times it doesn't matter because your Vanguard is so big that your opponent's either just going to take the damage or they're going to, you know, PG it. So do remember the 5k in case they want a hard guard, but most of the time they won't be hard guarding. Alright, so moving on into the main deck, we do have the grade 3s. Of course, we are actually playing the other 3 copies of Alter Ego Messiah in the main deck, just because unlike Chronojet Dragon, Messiah's second stride option is actually very good and is a very good finisher, unlike Chrono Dragon Next Stage. So I think it is definitely worth it to max out on the extra copies of Messiah. If I could play 4 more in the main deck, I totally would. And then, of course, moving on, we do have a new card from set 13 that definitely helps the deck out a whole ton. That is going to be the Stride Fodder Dragon for Bronzegate. So let's go ahead and go over it. So when it's placed on Rear Guardian Circle, you choose a grade 4 card from your hand. You reveal it. If you either reveal that card or your Vanguard is grade 4, you perform the following depending on the circle that this unit is on. Now, of course, you'll only ever have a grade 4 on your Vanguard during your turn, so you are unable to use it as a 15k guard, but you know, it still is very good. So when it's placed on rear, Soul Charge 1, and it gets an extra 10k until the end of turn, so very good for Messiah. The deck definitely needs a ton of soul, so having having a card that actually soul charges and is a 23 attacker for the turn is definitely very good. And then of course it does have the other auto skill, which all Stride Dragons have, which is when it's discarded from hand to ride into grade 3, or for paying the cost for Stride, you get a draw card. So it's another card that just replaces itself. Before we would had to rely on Astrolabe, who does very similar things. Astrolabe is slightly better just because he has a static 10k whenever you have him on, whenever you have a locked card, whereas this will only get 10k during the turn's placed. But the extra soul charge and the fact that it procs for discarding from Ride deck just makes this card infinitely better than Astrolabe, so it is just kind of just a straight replacement for the deck. Unless you want to play more Stride Fodder than just this, I would recommend just going 4 of this and 0 Astrolabe. Right, so getting into the grade 2s, of course, Messiah is a very combo-oriented deck, so we do have to play the 4 copies of Arrestor Messiah. Arrestor Messiah is your main combo enabler. After he attacks, if you have a Messiah Vanguard, he gets 5k. Do note that unlike Upstream, it's Upstream, he doesn't actually have to attack the Vanguard in order to get the 5k, but do note at the end of the battle, he locks himself, which is what we need because we need ways to get extra locked cards because Messiah is going to be unlocking them with the strides. And to that effect, we do also play the 4 copies of what's this card's name? Kaluzar Klein. I always just call him Klein. But if there's a lock card anywhere on the board, yours or your opponent's, it gets a 5k. So kind of just like Arrestor, it is also a 15k attacker. And then at the end of the battle that attacks, if you have the Alter Ego Messiah Crest, you can retire it to check the top 3 cards of your deck. You choose 1 unit card with equal or less than your Vanguard, put it on an open rearguard circle as lock. So basically, you swing with him, you retire him, and then you call something from the top as a lock card, usually to the position that he was in. Although, if you're early rushing with him, you might want to call it to the back row. But, of course, that is up to your preference. Alright, so continuing with the grade 2s, of course, we are actually playing 4 copies of Habitable Zone. Because I said this in the last deck profile, when he's discarded for Ride deck, you Soul Blast 1 and put him on the bottom of the deck in order to draw a card. He does have this other effect that works on Persona Ride only, but of course we are unable to Persona Ride in this deck because our grade 3 doesn't actually have the icon. But you Soul Blast 1, put it on the box to draw a card. So what I said in the last deck profile is, yes, it uses Soul, and Messiah can use that soul to draw a card, but you're effectively doing the same thing. So when you're doing this, you're basically just taking out a loan on that soul. You're getting your draw right now instead of having to wait until you get to grade 4 and get GB2 online. So having the extra cards early game just makes so much more impact than waiting until grade 4, because it's possible you can already die before you even stride in this format. So having those extra cards is just absolutely essential for the deck. Alright, so now getting into the hidden spice with this deck, I am actually opting to play 4 copies of Refrablishment Dock. So let's go over the card and then we'll discuss why I decided to put this in. So you play with Counterblast 1, and then of course when it is put into the order zone, you draw a card, and then its passive skill is that all your grade 2 rear guards get boost. So the reason we're playing this at 4 copies is because we actually don't have a way to search it, and because we need to be able to see it. With that out of the way, the reason why we're actually playing this is because of Bulbul Mine. If you remember in my tier list, I did say Bulbul Mine would make Messiah infinitely better, and this, I basically wanted to find an order card that would allow us to use Bulbul Mine in Messiah, and I figured this card is actually the best order card that you can use. For one, you don't actually use Counterblast in the early game, so you just play this down, use your Counterblast. If you happen to heal it, at least you're not healing a face-up damage, and it just works so well to just get you cycling, basically. This card is just basically CB1 cycle, and then the second skill does actually come up a lot. Secondly, this is technically also Stride Fodder. You would rather have this than in like a grade 1, so it can at least help you get there with striding. It doesn't meet the whole cost. I consider playing one of the grade 3 orders. Unfortunately, the only generic one that's available is the Avantgarde one, which I'm deciding not to play, even though it can be Stride Fodder, for the simple fact that it's a -1, and this card is technically a break even. And like I said, it lets you use that Counterblast, and then if you call Bulbul Mine, you can just countercharge that right back. And speaking of Bulbul Mine, let's go ahead and get him in the picture, because he is the second part of this order package. So now Bulbul Mine has always been a really great card, and I've always thought he would be really great in Messiah, because at the end of the battle, he boosts, you put him into Soul, and you countercharge. So you get your Counterblast back, you get Soul for Messiah, it's an extra draw, and an extra counter charge. It's just a win-win for Messiah. But the biggest issue has always been that your order zone needs to have a set order in order to actually activate that effect. So Bulb Mine is really good in every other Bronc Gate deck, but it's not good in Messiah because Messiah is the only Bronc Gate deck that doesn't use set orders. But by playing the Refurbishment Dock in the deck, we now have access to Bulb Mine, probably one of the best Bronc Gate cards we've seen in a long, I would say in a long time, but this is set 1, but probably one of the best generic Bronc Gate support cards. And just this order package honestly patches up so many of Messiah's issues. It lets you have 10k boosters. It lets you use the Awakening Messiah, because after he gives his 10k power with his skill, he's a 10k booster, so that's a 20k boost. And just like it lets you reuse Habitable Zones, so Habitable Zones are not dead, they become 10k boosters. And just everything about this order package in Messiah pushes it up just that little bit extra that we've been looking for since Messiah came out. And I am so ashamed that it took me this long to figure it out. But I would recommend play this order package if you want any hope of playing Messiah. Alright, so just going to be finishing off with the grade 1s. I am now playing one copy of the cat because not only is it a 20k shield and it's super easy to Soul Blast the rest of your ride line, Awakening is usually on board, but Asleep and Neo Messiah tend to end up in the drop zone since you Soul Blast very quickly and easily in this deck with things like Habitable Zone or things like, Messiah's skill. So it's just 20k shield in that sense, but you technically do have the ability to use the first skill when it's placed on rear guard. I guess I can review. If you haven't seen any of my deck profiles, a cat is you choose 2 cards from your ride deck that are in your drop zone or soul and put them back in the ride deck face up, and then you activate a skill depending on where it's placed. If it is a put on the Guardian Circle, it becomes a 20k shield, and if it's put on the rear guard for Bronc Gate, you choose a set order from your drop and add it to your hand. So theoretically, you can use the skill, call it, add back the set order if you're still missing one, like maybe you couldn't draw into it, which is kind of a little unlikely because Messiah does do a whole bunch of drawing, so it is pretty easy to draw into the order. But just in case you don't, you can always add it back if you're really desperate, or if you want to just cycle, you have an extra counterblast and you want to cycle a little bit more. But most of the time, it's just a 20k shield. And then finishing off the grade 1s, we do actually play 2 copies of Destiny Dealer. This is kind of just the flex slot. But the main reason, I guess we can discard him, he is technically Stride Fodder, so you can discard him as a grade 3. And then if you have the Alter Ego Crest, you can discard him to search your deck or drop from Messiah, put it in your hand. Like I said, the second Stride for Messiah is actually very good, so basically having 2 more copies of it in the deck is perfectly fine. But the other reason, as my deck tester will attest, is that after you use Klein, the cards actually go to the bottom of the deck. And there is no way to actually shuffle, so if you see something like a heal, crit, OT, it goes to the bottom of the deck, and you're never seeing that for the rest of the game. So with Destiny Dealer, you at least have the ability to shuffle the deck and maybe get those triggers back. But basically it's just there. A little bit extra Stride Fodder, but I found most of the time you don't actually need the extra Stride Fodder because you just draw so much, and 9 times out of 10 you'll draw into Stride Fodder. Alright, so just finishing off with some of the basics. Of course, we're playing the 4 PGs, the 1 Elementaria. Of course, just because, Drag Jeweled is a thing, and Drag Jeweled is probably your worst matchup, just because you do need a board, and Drag Jeweled does retire like your entire board. Of course, Jet sometimes still running around, and just play Elementaria. It gets around guard restrict. Alright, moving on to the trigger lineup. We, of course, are playing the 4 Soul and Crits. Do note that I would recommend playing 4 of the Decker Cop, just because, if you get the chance, if you call them off of Klein, you do have the ability to put them into Soul, and then that Soul will convert itself into another draw. Of course, playing the other 4 Crits that we can, just because, you can play the long game, but you prefer to play the short game, because you can probably kill by second stride in most matchups. That's just how powerful the order engine is, adding to Messiah's consistency. The main issue is getting to that second stride turn, but of course we do have a bunch of draws in order to enable that. And to that effect, we are playing the 3 fronts because we already draw a ton in this deck, and giving an extra front, 10k to your front row, is very good, especially since you're a 5 attack deck on your first stride turn, and pretty much every single turn after that having the fronts just makes a huge difference. And of course, we are just playing the 4 heals, just vanilla heals. You could play counter heals if you're really scared of the matchups, but, you know, I don't really see it necessary, especially with this thing. And of course, just playing Endo Breath, you know, auto win button, might as well play the auto win button if you hit it. All right, and just like I said, if you do want to take the 4 cards out, I would recommend just taking these cards out. Unfortunately, I think we can't run the 4th Bulb Mine until we get the next 4 cards. And then, of course, like I said, Destiny Dealer isn't absolutely necessary. And Cat, unfortunately, is something that does have to get cut. But, of course, he is instantly in as soon as we get 40 or 54 cards. But if you want to play this with just the 50 cards, I would recommend just take these cards out. Because the order package is fine with the 3 Bulb Mine, because a set order without Bulb Mine is just, you know, a cycle, but a Bulb Mine without a set order is kind of just an 8k vanilla. Alright, and I guess we just finish by just going over the crest. So just do note, it lets you stride, your Vanguard is at 13k, and then your front row gets an extra 5k for every face-up card in your G-Zone during your turn, and then at the end of your turn you actually unlock all of your opponent's locked cards, and then those units get bound. So your locks convert into removal, but they won't stop your opponent from calling units their next turn. Of course, G-Zone is the only thing that the G-Zone can be. The 4 copies of Amnesty. Amnesty, of course, is always your first stride, because when it attacks, you counter +1, flip a unit in your G-Zone. You choose any number of players' locked cards, unlock them. Do know it says any player, so you can actually unlock your opponents if you are desperate and you need to. And then you choose one of your rear guards. It gets 5k until the end of the card for each card unlocked by this ability. So do note that this, unlike what's his name, Fate Rider, scales in a different way. Fate Rider scales for each face-up card in the G-Zone. He just scales for every card unlocked. So you're usually giving an extra 15k on your first stride turn. So whereas, you know, Fate Rider gives an extra 5k, which is like whatever, which is why Messiah scales a lot faster, but kind of has a lower ceiling, or a higher ceiling. I don't know how to describe it. It's more fragile than Chrono Jet. And then, of course, we are playing the other stride, just the 4 copies of Amnesty Messiah, or Exilus, excuse me, which is usually a foot fodder. You do have to discard the Messiah in order to stride this, which is why we play the 4 or the 3 extra copies. So when it attacks on GB2, so obviously it has to be your second stride, or after that, when it attacks CB1, choose any number of players' locked cards. You unlock them. If you unlock a card, choose the same number of your rear guards as the number of cards that were unlocked by this ability, stand them, and then until end of turn, all your front row units get plus 10k, and this unit gets an extra crit. So this is probably the only unit you would use in order to unlock your opponent's rear guards. Like if you have a column and you want to restand both of them, but you were only able to get like 1 arrestor, you can, or I don't know, it's happened to me where I unlock my opponent's things to restand mine. But you know, it comes up sometimes, but this is your main finisher. If you go into this, 9 times out of 10 you're going to win, and if you don't, you're probably going to win on the next turn. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and finish off with just a quick test hand. So our opening hand, what we're looking to find is a copy of Refurbishment Dock. We're looking for some stride fodder, and then of course a combo piece. So we take a look at our opening hand. We do technically have stride fodder in the form of the Alter Ego Messiah, but it is not the greatest. Of course, we don't actually want the triggers right now. The cat is also kind of useless, and then Bulb Mine actually can't do anything. So we're just going to go ahead and mull 5 there. Check if we get a better hand from this top 5. Looks like we got the stride fodder and we got some combo pieces. So let's go ahead and see. Hopefully we can draw into some Refurbishment Dock. So we're gonna go ahead and stand up. For this gameplay, we're gonna go ahead and just go second, because that is obviously what we want to be doing. I think in this instance, we either discard the Klein or the front trigger. I think the front trigger is just a little bit more valuable in this meta. So we're gonna go ahead and discard it. Going second is going to let us draw 1 card, and then of course getting the crest is going to let us draw another card. Unfortunately, 2 cards that we really do not need to see, but what we can do is we can just call down the Bulb Mine to make our Vanguard that much more difficult to guard. Drive check into a habitable zone. That'll be great for our ditch for next turn. We're going to go ahead and just take a damage, going to get that Alter Ego Messiah. Perfectly fine. If we heal it out, we can get it back with the Destiny Dealer. So we go ahead and stand and draw. thankfully drawing into the Refurbishment Dock, which is the best time to draw into. So we're going to go ahead and use our Habitable Zone, ride, and then of course use Habitable Zone skill to Soul Blast, bot deck the Habitable Zone, and then just draw another card. We're going to draw into a Destiny Dealer. So in this instance, we probably don't really want to do a whole bunch. We're going to activate the Refurbishment Dock to replace itself, draw into a Klein. That's totally great, so we can just call it out. We're going to swing with the Klein, see if we can't get something good off of the top. We're going to retire it, draw, take a look at the top 3 cards of the deck. Obviously, we're going to call the thing that's not a trigger. We have Destiny Dealer, so we'll actually be able to shuffle this back next turn, and this Habitable Zone might seem a little bit useless right now, but it is actually going to be a 10k booster thanks to Refurbishment Dock. We're going to go ahead and swing at the Vanguard, drive check 1, just going to be another PG, some cards we really don't need, but we do actually have full combo. We're going to put the Bowl Mine, since we do have a set order, to countercharge. So basically, paying for the Refurbishment Dock, making it absolutely free, meaning that we can afford to take only 1 damage. So let's say we take the rear guard, gets the power, and then, I don't know, for some reason they can attack over defensive, or we're just going to make sure that their Vanguard can't actually hit. So we draw, we go ahead and, of course, this is actually supposed to be unlocked. We're going to go ahead and draw for turn, discarding the Stride Fodder Dragon because we're going to get to draw another card thanks to its skill. And then, of course, we're going to draw into another Refurbishment Dock. At this point, it's kind of useless, but of course, you know, it's better. It's still Stride Fodder and can cycle if we need it. So we're going to go ahead and discard another copy in order to Stride. Then, of course, it's going to let us draw another card, draw into another Stride Fodder, using the Awakening Messiah skill to call itself, and then the Stride skill to Counterblast 1, lock it, and not draw a card, Soul Charge a card. I think that's our last Cosmo. We're going into the damage zone. And then, of course, we can probably, let's go ahead and deck thin, use the Destiny Dealer, shuffle back in that OT, as well as adding our stride cost for next turn, because next turn we're probably going to be going into the Exilix Messiah to try and finish things out. I'm just going to shuffle that up. I'm going to put that there. And then, of course, we want to call a couple of rear guards. Probably just going to call... Actually, this is going to be a weaker column, so I think I'm going to call it like this. Using the Klein, keeping the Arrestor, because Arrestors are prime attack targets, because literally if your Arrestors die, you have nothing else to do. So swing the Klein at the Vanguard, retire it, and then check top 3. Hopefully you don't get OT again. Very cool, we got a Habitable Zone. That's not terrible. So it's going to be placed here as lock. And then we could choose to boost this attack. And I think I just might to make it 25 instead of just 15, just so it hits for a better number. Even though it's just a 15k guard, it's still totally fine. He's going to lock at the end of the battle because we're going to be unlocking it and getting a whole bunch of power. So we're going to Counterblast 1, unlock 3 cards, giving an extra 15k. We're going to give it to this Arrestor. And then, of course, the skill of the Awakening Messiah is going to have 10k to the Habitable Zone. And then, of course, it's going to be booster. So we're going to go ahead and drive check. 1, 2, 3. So that was a pretty pitiful drive check, but it does kind of prevent us from being damage denied because we can always use Bold Mine to boost, countercharge, and then still use our skill. And then, of course, we still have 2 more attacks. This is going to be for 35 because of the crest. We do actually have to flip. So that is 15k with its skill, and then another 15k from the 3 unlocks, and then another 5k to the entire front row from the crest. And then, of course, this is just going to be a 25k column. Actually, it's going to be 35 because Awakening gives another 10k. So another, basically a 20k boost to that column. Of course, we're going to destride. Arrestor is going to lock. Arrestor is going to unlock. Our opponent's rear guard is going to unlock as well. And we're going to Soul Blast 2 in order to draw 2 cards. So basically bolstering up our defenses, making so that we actually can't be really damage denied during the next turn. So let's say they attack, a weak attack, we can intercept. We can take a damage, get a front trigger. They're probably going to attack into our Arrestor Messiah to kill it, but that's totally fine. And then let's say we guard another one. So going into our next turn, we are kind of all set up in order to do our kill turn. So we're going to go ahead and draw for turn, discarding the Messiah in order to stride into Exilix Messiah, using the stride skill because we have Bubble Mine, locking this, and then of course locking the opponent's rear guard. I think in this instance we're actually going to call over Habitable Zone with the Bubble Mine. And then what we can do here also is call the Arrestor, and we can actually call out our Stride Dragon and then use its skill to Soul Charge and get another 10k for the turn. So we have a pretty good attack pattern here. We have 2 face up in the G zone, so this is going to be a total of 33. We're swinging the Bubble Mine, boosted or boosting the Arrestor. Arrestor is at 15 with the 8k boost. It's 23. Another 10k to the front row. That's going to be 33. And actually, we're not going to use Bulbul Mine skill quite yet, but Arrestor is going to be locking itself. Actually, we do have to use it. Normally, we wouldn't if we had the extra counter charge, but of course, we do actually need that counter charge because we're going to attack with the Exilix. Karen Blast 1, Unlock 2. If we had left the Bulbul Mine there, we could have stood it, but of course, we're just going to be standing 1, giving 10k to the front row, and another crit to the Vanguard. So we're going to go ahead and triple drive, crit, Bulbul Mine, heal. Let's say the heal goes off because they're probably guarding our big swings so far. And then give power to the Arrestor because this gets another 10k thanks to this. And then, of course, we still have some pretty big swings. This is just 25 with the crest. And then, of course, another 10k makes it 35. Trigger power would be like 45 if we split it. And then this column is swinging for 23, 33, 43, 53 without the trigger. And then, of course, this is going to be locked, and then that destrides, and then 1 card unlocks. Technically 2 because our opponent does unlock theirs, and we draw 2 more cards. Alright, so that's going to do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to see all those YouTube things. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.